Thank you for listening and subscribing to the Clive Barker podcast. In episode 265, Markus joins Ryan and Jose to continue our discussion of the Imaginer series with Clive Barker Imaginer 7. This episode is sponsored by Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination. Don Bertram's Celebrate Imagination shop is dedicated to benefiting the Arts and Medicine program at Texas Children's Cancer Center. Up to 50% of the proceeds will support the program where artist Don Bertram volunteers monthly. Don Bertram is a longtime friend of Clive and celebrates and continues to be inspired by his art. He uses that inspiration to help kids through the Texas Children's Cancer Center. And we couldn't be more thrilled to continue working with him. There's a new feature video that shows Don working with the kids at Texas Children's Cancer Center and his artwork. Click the side banner at clivebarkercast.com to find links to videos and his Etsy shop where you can buy his prints, books, and support this wonderful program. Check out his artwork and find out what inspired me to buy The Sentinel in episode 257, Art and Inspiration with Don Bertram. And in addition, as you're perusing Imaginer 7 along with this discussion, you'll see his name featured prominently in the special thanks on this and many other of the volumes of Imaginer. Welcome. This is episode 265 of the Clive Barker podcast, and we're going to be discussing the art book Clive Barker Imaginer 7, part 7 of an 8-part series of books. And I'm Ryan.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Markus.
Hey, good to talk to you guys again.
Yeah. Nice to be back. Nice to hear from you guys too.
Yeah. So, Imaginer 7 came out in 2019. I think the pre-orders and the book all came out in the same year, right?
Yeah.
And it covers paintings from 1985 to 2017, which is the same as Imaginer 6, right? That's the same
I believe so.
Broad spectrum of years.
Yeah. And there's some stuff that goes back a long time, and there's some really new stuff with actual different styles and everything, which I would call post Coma, I would say. That actually, the introduction will get into that and talks about how Clive changed some of his painting style because he had physical limitations after coming out of a coma that prevented him from doing paintings as big as A Beautiful Moment anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a quote that opens this book, Ryan, that you took a picture of and you shared on Facebook. And I think this quote is so, perfect for the time that we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a strange coincidence to see that there, since this came out last year, before. I mean, I guess there were troubles then, but not like there are now.
Yeah, and the fact that the quote is from 1995, too, just shows you how cyclical history is and the world is.
And how the world never changes, right?
Sadly not, yeah. Yeah, we just keep falling back into the same old traps, pretty much.
Yeah, like they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I would like to read the quote, if that's okay. It's from The Advocate, so I'm not sure if this is from the interview where Clive Barker came out, so to speak, but it says here, "I don't believe there are any true solutions to the world's various ills without spiritual solutions, which for me means imaginative solutions, means reaching what I think is the divine part of us, our imagination. One of the things the imagination does is allow you to access to other people's lives. In imagining in other people's thoughts and feelings, you better understand them. It's the only way to fight the phobias that are in everybody, the only way to fight the animal impulse to view the world tribally, making everybody unlike us the enemy." So, and here we are in a super divided society right now.
Yeah, things feel more tribally than ever in my lifetime, I feel like.
Yeah, I've never experienced anything like this before. We're going through unprecedented times, and
the division and just the fact that everything has become so political.
Yeah. And everything has become so drab and so unimaginative, right? that's the answer that I find, the solace that I take from this quote is that what we're doing right now, like exercising our imagination, talking about art, experiencing art, seeing the importance of creative work and imagination. And I think we've all been through that, especially you, Markus, you being more of an artist than we are. You know how it is. I actually saw in my Facebook memories today a painting that you did from your anxiety series about this creature. She's got these long, very elongated fingers and this long drooping hair.
Oh, and yes.
Yeah, and do you still have that piece?
Yeah, it's hanging on my wall right now. I'm actually looking.
That's wonderful. I saw that picture today, and I was like, "This is one of the most powerful works that you've done that I've seen," and it still blows my mind. And that's what we do when we don't feel like the world is giving us the answers that we want. We have to come up with answers from ourselves. We have to recreate the world through imagination. Yeah. And that way we can maybe make a little bit of sense and create a little bubble of comfort for ourselves.
First of all, thank you so much for saying that. That really means so much. And yeah, second, I mean, I live in California. Today is actually the first day that they're lifting the quarantine. So, just life has still been really stagnant and, it's just isolated and whatnot. And the highlight of my week is sitting down and opening up this book and delving back into the worlds of Clive and being inspired and in reading, essentially Clive's philosophy on art. And now getting to sit down and talk with you guys, it's the highlight of my week. So art is, as Clive says in 5 or 6, that art is hot bread. It's food for the soul. So
yeah,
that's absolutely correct. And again, imagination is not just a way of creating something that doesn't exist. It's also a way of finding solutions for daily problems sometimes. You have to imagine the world. You don't have to imagine a world that's not like the one you live in, but you can imagine solutions to the world that you live in through imagination. You can try to come up with ideas, and that's also imagining stuff, I think. It's not just creating something that's outside of the world that you live in, outside of the real world that you live in. I think imagination can also help you in visualizing a world that's better, but still, something that's attainable, not necessarily something that's completely fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
This book opens with with Clive Barker, Imaginer, embracing the Philosopher's Stone. So it's kind of a fairly long introductory essay by Phil and Sarah Stokes with excerpts from discussions with Clive Barker. Centering around the time around between 2007 to 2014 or so. Him writing Mr. Begone, The Scarlet Gospels, Abarat 3, and where he was and what was going on in his life at that time, and that the fact that these are all kind of bleak stories. Even the children's book Abarat 3 is pretty dark, and what was going on in his life to kind of cause that, which was kind of sad to read and a little depressing.
Yeah, there was definitely some troubled times mentioned in this introduction. Some people who passed away, some relationships that ended. Clive Barker, when he, I remember when I looked up at Twitter, because at the time Clive Barker was on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I think the day that this came out was mid-December of 2012. And I remember Clive Barker had a tweet on his Twitter that said, "My friends, Clive here. I'm at home now after a while in the hospital thanks to a nearly fatal case of toxic shock brought on by a visit to my dentist. Apparently, this is not uncommon. In my case, the dental work unloaded such a spillage of poisonous bacteria into my blood that my whole system crashed, putting me into a coma." And then he goes on to say how he spent several days in intensive care with a machine breathing for him, a ventilator, and that the doctors were, basically saying, "I don't know if he's going to make it." And he kept having these nightmarish delusions and, ultimately came out of his coma, which here in the intro, I think they mentioned 3 weeks of coma.
Yes, it was 3 weeks.
And he had 3 strokes and all that stuff that he was having. And he was also having problems with pain in his leg that was preventing him from standing around and painting. He was having trouble with his arm. He was having some sort of neuralgia that was preventing him from actually being able to write for long periods of time. That's how he switched to using a keyboard and computer. And if you know Clive, you know he's been a bit of a Luddite when it came to technology for a long time. He was a big long-form handwriting kind of guy, manuscripts actually written by hand.
Yeah, that was really surprising to read that he was typing with a keyboard. I never remembered reading that or hearing about that before.
Yeah, when I saw Clive give a Q&A for the Cabal Cut in 2013, I think, in LA with Mark Miller. And he was saying that before the Coma, the only other time that he ever dictated a book was Cabal. And so he actually had to go back for after the coma that he was also having to dictate his writing too.
I wonder why he dictated Cabal.
You know, I was wondering that too, but I distinctly remember him saying that Cabal was the first time that he had ever dictated a book. And I don't remember if he said why that was. I'm sure that the Q&A is on YouTube somewhere.
And I think that has an effect on his style too. I mean, Cabal is written pretty differently than a lot of his other books.
Yeah, I would imagine that dictating a book, would definitely, because when you're looking at the words on the paper, but I do know that Clive also reads all of his work aloud to listen to the flow and see how it sounds aloud. So I don't know how much of an effect that has on his style. But yeah, I was pretty shocked to learn that he was using a keyboard, which I didn't know until reading this introduction here. But he was having the leg pain and the hand problems even before the coma.
Right. He was having other problems too, like when he started getting throat polyps and he had to go in for surgery, and that was keeping him from breathing properly and making him tired all the time. And you could tell, when you saw him paint and stuff in public appearances, that he would really sweat it out. He was really exerting himself. And he mentions here that he was kind of burning the candle both ways and the middle.
Yeah.
So
he talked about going to his Hawaii, his house in Kauai, and he couldn't relax there, and he couldn't just sit on the beach.
Yeah, he says that he was so depleted of energy. He describes it that somebody had essentially drained him of all energy and inspiration. I'm not sure exactly where that is in the introduction to be able to find it and quote it, but.
It's at the beginning of it. His mother had passed away as well recently.
Yeah.
Justin Brown, who was this mentee that he had at the time, he was a young Iraqi veteran, and he was, I think, a student at UCLA, and he was. There's an interview here that I found where it says that he was actually, at the time of the interview, that Justin was shooting a project outside in Clive's driveway while they were interviewing Clive, and he mentions how he would talk to Justin and he would tell him stories about the war, and sometimes he would tell him funny jokes, and then the next minute he's kind of crying about something that he saw. And unfortunately Justin passed away in 2009 as well, which seems like it was a really bad year for Clive. It says, I found a tweet where he mentioned that. It was from August 30, 2009, and Clive simply tweeted out, his name was Justin Brown. His death was accidental and came at a time when his future could not have been brighter. So this was the only time that I found of him mentioning him on Twitter. I think he mentioned him not by name, but that he talked to a young Iraqi veteran and stuff. But so Clive was, at this time Clive had broken up with David Armstrong as well. So it was just a bad time for Clive.
Yeah, I put in the show notes there is 2 videos. It's called Clive Barker's Masterclass Part 1 and 2, and he's doing a Q&A, And he begins to, at the 22 mark in part 1, he begins to tell the audience the story of Justin and how he came to meet him and how Justin impacted his life and whatnot. And Clive gets really emotional towards the end of it. It's a really moving video, and anyone who hasn't seen it, go to the Seraphim channel on YouTube and look up those Clive Barker masterclasses part 1 and 2.
That was at the Sitges Festival in Spain, right? In 2009.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And of course, Clive also gives some very, beautiful philosophical quotes and whatnot. And, it's a good interview to listen to all the way through.
Sure thing.
But yeah, in this introduction here, Clive says, quote, Abarat addresses conflict, and as it goes on its way, I've been thinking about war, talking to my friend Justin, getting Justin's visions of war. He's a powerful storyteller. We met for a couple hours last week and had a marvelous time where he was talking to me of his experiences in Iraq, laughing one moment and crying the next. It was tremendous. And, obviously that had a lot of impact on Abarat 3, because Abarat 3 is a very dark book, and it does deal with a lot of really heady, dark themes and content that you wouldn't expect for a book that's supposed to be for all ages, or some would even argue is for young adults. It's a YA novel. Mm-hmm. But he even talks about the paintings also being dark, which they are. I personally think the paintings in Abarat 3 are the best of the series. But he says, quote, the books are going to have pictures that are frightening embodiments of things still to come. The Stitchling's howl is one of the grimmest pictures in the book, and I just wanted to show total heartlessness, a total lack of humanity. I wanted to say this is what it would look like to be surrounded by Stitchlings, to have the whole canvas from top to bottom of the painting completely gray and brown pigments, no release, no compassion, no morality. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to compare them to the Nazi war machine.
Right.
And how they might have play in Abarat 4 and 5, but he's kind of on the cusp, because that is really, really dark imagery to be,
It's a monolithic, lack of identity, right? It's just a bunch of people just, Stitchlings are just full of mud, and they're just there, and they're just following orders, which kind of, equates to the Nazis in a way.
Oh, yes, most definitely. And, living in a time where, you never thought that Nazism would be on the rise, and here it is rearing its ugly head again.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that history just seems to kind of repeat itself.
Exactly. And when we talk about a war machine or the Nazi machine or whatever, what a machine does is just a serial kind of production, right? So all these soldiers they completely get stripped of all individualism, pretty much just like the Stitchlings. That's why he made them occupy the entire canvas. Yeah. And you can barely tell where one starts and the other ends.
It's really haunting in that the only real detail that you get besides the gray that kind of stands out from the blacks and the browns are the scratches of the knife that give them more detail in the ribs and the eyes and the screams of the howl and
the howling mouths.
Yeah, it is really haunting.
And Abarat 3, there's also at the beginning of the book, there's a Madam, what was her name? A Mrs. Munn,
Laguna Munn.
Yeah, Laguna Munn. And there was in the revelatory interview number 28, there was a mention here how Justin's death kind of affected Clive while he was writing it. They were talking about, how Candy was a random pick, and, they were talking about the women in his books that are always very complicated. And he says, well, yes, but I would actually agree that these are, especially for a younger audience, orders of magnitude more complex. If you look, I think he's talking about the Phantomaya and Mrs. Munn and Candy. He says, if you look right down at the list at them, including some which have not yet shown their complexity, that is, they've appeared but haven't yet. Even a woman like Mrs. Munn, you think she's going to be what? A good witch? These things were all affecting Clive, and, none of this stuff is written in a vacuum. So eventually, all this stuff makes its way into it one way or the other. Like when Ryan was talking about Clive, mentioning in the beginning of this intro, going to Kauai. Was it Kauai, Ryan?
Yeah.
Where Clive had a house that I think he sold in the meantime. But he went there, and he's a little bit like Galilee, right? Where he goes to Hawaii, but he can't have any fun. And that is textbook depression. When you feel yourself unable, you go somewhere that's like paradise, but all you do is stay at the house and just look at things, and you look at the books that you took to read, and you can't even read them because you get that feeling that you don't have the energy to do anything. You're just there.
Yeah.
And the problem is, it's not just changing places that's going to change your life. You're still the same person on the inside, and you have those problems that follow you.
Yeah, you're still going to bring all of it with you. Yeah, he says, the quote is, I was so thoroughly depleted that I left the house once, twice, and slept and gazed mindlessly at books, which I brought to read but didn't have the energy for. I mean, we've all been in these places. The times when your energy burns out. But I'm used to having bags of energy. It was a big shock to me to find that some of my reserves were so low that I literally did not have the interest to go out and look at the water. And I'm not exaggerating. It really was that. I mean, I really was just I can't describe it. It was like somebody opened a tap and poured my energy and passion out of me.
Yeah. It actually has a name. It's, when you can't feel happy about doing anything because you're depressed, they call it Anhedonia. So that's a symptom of it's an inability to feel pleasure. It's a common symptom of depression.
Yeah. And going further in this introduction, and then you read after the coma and after that whole scare, the fact that he says when since coming home I've only left the house 5 times, and he leaves one depression and then he has the health thing, and then even if he did want to leave, he can't because he's physically unable to.
Yeah. And you have to think about that 2009, 2010, it says here, an intense, it talks here a little bit about between 2008 and 2010, he had those surgeries to remove the polyps from his throat, which also marked kind of like Clive's declaration that he was going to stop smoking cigars and stuff like that. And I think it was 2008 or something that Clive said he was going to stop pitching movies and focusing so much energy into movie making, and he was just going to focus more on his art and his books. Some people might see that as, Clive just switching gears or quitting on something, but it's more just switching gears, right? It's just because, he got tired of the whole, I remember when he mentioned something on Twitter where he said, I was just getting all starry-eyed about Hollywood. And then once I started doing it, basically he was talking about how this is a very tough process to get a movie from script to actual movie making, and he was just a very long process, and he was tired of that. So he was just going to focus his energies now into doing just his art and stuff.
And that was a tough time for Clive Barker fans to hear. I mean, a tough thing for us to hear, because we got 3 movies out of him basically, and plus the ones spun off by other directors.
Yeah.
And and now it's like that's all over. I mean, and we just had Lord of Illusions. I guess it would have been 10 years ago, at that point. But yeah, that was tough to hear, because his movies to us were so brilliant and so perfect, but it was from his point of view it was hard, and not getting.
I always thought that his vision was transmitted much more in a much purer form through books and his art. So ultimately, I didn't get that disappointed about it. I was actually one of the guys who was like, yeah, okay, well, good. So maybe now we'll get more Abarat and stuff. But yeah, I understand how for some people that would be like, oh man, we want to see more movies with, another Hellraiser with Clive Barker at the helm and stuff like that. That would be tremendous.
Yeah, but you can't blame him for getting
not at all.
Because you have to have 20 scripts going at one time, and things always fall through, or your vision's always compromised, especially when it comes to Clive's work. And I'm still surprised that he made Lord of Illusions after everything that happened with Nightbreed. But Clive says that painting is his most liberating form of artistic expression, because there's literally no one telling him what to do. There's nobody questioning him. There's nobody saying, like, why are you doing this? What does this mean? Why are you putting that line there? Whereas, books are pretty, books he can do whatever he wants for the most part as well, but you still have an editor to please and a publisher to please, and you still have these higher ups.
Yeah, and they don't give him total freedom, right? I mean, like, look how hard he had to push to get Thief of Always out.
Yeah.
Or Weaveworld, he had to completely change Weaveworld from a children's story to an adult, novel to get anyone to pay it attention.
Well, it seemed like even Abarat too. He wanted to make a book of hours for a while, and it seemed like the publishers weren't really keen on that until he started painting the paintings, and then he was like, "No, look what this can be."
Yeah.
The introduction mentions a very intense 1st of March to 15th of July 2010 period in which Clive wrote the final draft of Absolute Midnight. And that was another one of those books that, if you remember the second one, Days of Magic, Nights of War, Clive threw away an entire version of that book and started from scratch. And then for the third one, this was around the time when Clive was having lots of troubles, with HarperCollins and stuff like that. And
he also wrote an entire book in the middle of writing Abarat 3, right? He wrote Mr. Begone in the middle of it.
Yeah. Because that was true. 2009?
I think so, yeah.
2008? 2007.
Seven was Mr. Begone.
Okay, then
around Halloween time or November or something like that. That's when it came out, I think.
2004 was Days of Magic, Nights of War, right?
Yeah. And it was a very tough time because, he was sending his editors a draft of Abarat 3, and then they were like, oh, yeah, this is great, no notes. And he was like, what? Because he sent them like a completely incomplete draft where some characters changed names halfway. And he was like, oh. And he got really disappointed because people were changing inside, the editor publishing house, and he was kind of losing the people that he used to work with. And he was like, he didn't feel like people were actually invested in what he wanted to publish, and that kind of
like they weren't
made him go into a panic.
They weren't giving it attention. They were just like, that's great, Like,
and then, whatever, we'll publish it. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, and then he was desperately trying to finish Abarat 3 and trying to find a way to get that done, and it was way past schedule. And I think Rob Humphreys was working on it. Mark Miller at the time had just kind of started working with them.
Yeah.
And I think he also took the task of getting a big stack of papers that said, okay, this is Abarat 3, go at it. And Clive was sleeping under his desk. And, they were trying to do as much work as they could to finish that book. And people were climbing on the roofs of houses and yelling at the sky.
Well, and that was the time when he had developed that sort of crook in his neck where his head was tilted to the side.
Yeah.
From sleeping in his chair while he was writing and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was a tough time for Clive. He was dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of loss, a lot of change in his life. It's
and not to mention that the material he was working with was also just as dark and heavy material.
Yeah.
So, like the escapism that he usually has was essentially just taking the pains he was enduring through his daily life and turning it, into art.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Begone is a great story, but it's also pretty bleak and sad. And you just feel so horrible for that poor little Jacobok.
Yeah, at the end, you realize that he's not this big bad, but he's this very, sad. Sad
and
creature.
it's like his parents, or especially his father, denounce him. The love of his life, Quitoon, right, just kind of laughs at him and ignores him and turns his back on him.
At the end, I don't feel a lot of sympathy for him, though. I still feel like I still feel like Jacobach did a lot of stuff wrong too, and he's kind of a liar.
Yeah.
He tells a story. He is the one telling the story, so he's kind of an unreliable narrator. And at the end, he's kind of threatening that he's going to get out and he's going to get revenge and stuff like that. So,
it's kind of like pulling back the curtain and saying, Oz being this sad old man, is that at the end of the book, you realize that he doesn't have this power, that he is helpless, and he's just sad.
So, apart from that monumental, life-changing event, which is the Coma, that changed everything for Clive, which was not. He was not having a lot of fun at the time either, but the Coma really changed everything because it changed him physically. It put him in a situation where he became, he was in recovery for years. And he, in fact, you might say he still is in recovery. Yeah. He's suffered from diabetes. He's, he has other problems now, and he's, still very much, This put him in a position of more, you would say, frailty compared to how he was in the early 2000s. And that also changed the way he did art. It changed the way that he claimed that a lot of the paintings of Abarat were already finished. But, it's like Oscar Wilde says, no artist is ever, no work of art is ever completed. It's just abandoned. Yeah. And to this day, we still read in this introduction that Clive still did paintings long after, one would imagine that the paintings were already completed, and he's been doing paintings in a different style now. When he came out of the Coma, he knew that he couldn't just, make big canvases anymore. He didn't have the energy. He didn't have the physicality to do that. So he started doing smaller scale stuff like black and white pen. He didn't use the sumi brush that much anymore, but he did little, drawings and on his knees and stuff, and smaller paintings using finger paintings, reeds from his garden. Yeah. His penis,
Oh yeah, he says, quote, "I've painted with everything. I've painted with my fingers, obviously, steak knives, forks, my dick. Brushes are really not very high on my list of items to be used, just because they are predictable. They provide predictable marks because they're designed to be predictable, right? They have a width, they have a shape, they're often shaped and so on. And I want to be surprised by the mark." And there's even a picture where you see these reeds and twigs from, that you gather is probably from his backyard, along with brushes and, on his art table. And it's because he wants to be surprised. He wants to find something that is different and that you wouldn't just get with the predictability of using a brush that
And a part of this is that he has trouble standing, so he can't do like these huge tall canvases because he just can't stand up that long, or at that time he couldn't stand up that long. But another part too, and this is something that we kind of discussed with Thomas Negovin, I think, when we had him on the podcast, is that it felt like something had happened with Clive, and that he made him sort of have a more direct connection to sort of his subconscious and the way that the art was coming out, more abstract. He was experimenting with more abstract stuff and less definitive or what's the word that they keep using for that? Representational, I think. Yeah.
His style became much, much more loose, much more, I don't want to say chaotic, because there is a precision in the chaos that he makes. But yes, it is very abstract, very metaphysical, very, very, very different from his earlier works. But also, they do mention that in the large oil canvases, if you do look at the colorful patterns that he places within characters and backgrounds and such, the abstractness is similar to the smaller abstract pieces that he's been making.
Yeah.
I just want to point out how lucky we are as Clive's audience and as Clive's artistic, fans, that after he came out of the coma and after he had his 3 strokes, that they did not affect his motor skills in terms of drawing. Because you can look at drawings that he's made after that from 2016, from 2017. I don't know if that's an evolution or if that's a compensation, but you look at the Archbishop, which is on page 1267, and it's just drawing with a pen and paper. He makes such an intense, beautiful, figurative portrait.
Yes, I actually own this piece.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I am so jealous.
Yeah, his line drawings are really, really remarkable because they are so loose and yet it is still so. There is like I said, there is
so much life. It's so vibrant. Like the eyes are so alive in the Archbishop. It's just this man with like a round hat. And he's just kind of wearing a tunic, and you can see in the back, like behind him, it looks like a sea and clouds and some birds in the sky.
Yeah,
and it's he almost looks a little bit like Doug Bradley right now. But I'm so amazed that you have this piece. I am so happy that it went to you. It's a beautiful, amazing piece, and wow. You're lucky.
I'll send you guys a picture after this.
Going back to what you were saying, Jose, about how lucky. I mean, I was shocked to read also because we've heard some detail about his toxic shock, but hearing that on the trip home from the dentist that he had 3 strokes and they had to rush him to the hospital. I mean, oh my god,
that was on the way to the hospital that he had. Yeah, but I mean,
so yeah, and so I didn't understand the timeline of all of this because I thought that it happened right there at the dentist's office, and they rushed him from there. But apparently, they got all done and wrapped up, and he went home, and that's what happened on the. So yeah, so scary, and so lucky that he's in that he got out of that with his faculties and stuff.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I've had a family that had strokes, and it affects their eyesight, it affects their coordination, it affects their speech, it affects their limbs, and unfortunately, I have some people in my side of the family that have gone through cardiovascular incidents like this, and it can just like that, your life can get changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it didn't change Clive Barker's life dramatically, but so lucky that it didn't affect his ability to draw, to paint, to write. It just gave him, he overcame that in a very, very quick way.
Yeah, he notes that, on the contrary to the doctor's orders, that, he's just went back to work right away and was drawing and sketching and writing. And
in episode 50 that we had Alex, at the time he was Clive's social media guy, he said that as soon as he woke up of his coma, one of the first things he asked was a recorder, so that an audio recorder, so he could start dictating more stuff about Abarat. So from his hospital bed.
Yeah.
So I don't know how accurate that is, but that's what he told us in our episode. So
and Phil and Sarah also include a piece that apparently Clive made right when he came out of the coma.
Mm-hmm. With the faces, right?
There's 2 faces emerging from the shadows, and they go on to talk about how that they noticed that this was a motif ever since he came out of the coma, is that he has continually been making these figures or these faces that are emerging from shadows, and they kind of talk about how it could be related to the semi-conscious fog that he was in whilst in the coma, because he says that he wasn't absent of mind. Like he still had some recollections, these half memories of seeing the doctors and nurses over his hospital bed through a fog, and that these could be where the motif of these figures emerging from the darkness came from. And I don't know where the Facebook or Twitter post that I'm about to talk about is or when it was from, but I distinctly remember reading that Clive had posted that he had some sort of dream of going out of his house and seeing these figures standing in like these robes, and the robes were
flowing in the wind.
Yeah, like sails of a ship. And
I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm really surprised that Phil and Sarah Stokes don't talk about in this introduction is the fact that a lot of the Coma experience Clive has been channeling for Deep Hill, and that's why he's kind of shifted gears from Abarat 4 and 5 to really focusing on Deep Hill, because this kind of gave him new things to say, and this is something that he really needs to express.
That's a good point. Page number 1268 and 69 shows some of the different paintings that Clive started doing.
Yes,
which are a little less figurative and more impressionistic. They're a little more. He uses like eyedroppers for paint. He draws these. He paints these in his knees. They're a little smaller scale paintings, and he does mention here. It turned out as time went by that I found new methodologies. I produced pictures that were small, obviously, but very, very intense, so that they could sit perfectly happily with one of the canvases in Imaginer. A lot of them are abstract or semi-abstract, which is a completely new adventure for me. There's something very interesting about transferring my subconsciousness from representation to abstract, and it says something about where my head is. So I think I mentioned this before in another one of the Imaginer book episodes, that there were some of the paintings that he did, like in 2017, 2016, that I am particularly struck by the style of them, and the way that the paint is more like drippy and more like it's abstract and impressionistic, and something that I would love to have on my wall, just because it's different, but it's still very much the importance of color and the importance of the emotion of the canvas and the emotion of color. It still speaks very, very loudly to me. So,
yes.
Yeah.
There was something that really kind of stuck out to me in this introduction too, where he was talking about the painting in the upper left corner, right? He said
the Man of War.
Yeah, he said he says I'm calling it Untitled. If I called it a Portuguese Man of War, then all of a sudden I'm telling everybody what they're looking at, and that's all they'll ever see. But if I call it Untitled, then you don't know what it is. It could be anything, and that brought to mind something from my own sort of past. You know, when I was 2.5 years old, I made a picture, and I pasted it in here at the bottom of our show notes if you want to look at it. But
okay,
it was just a bunch of black and red lines, you know, on a piece of paper, and my mom saved it, and she said, Ryan, what is that? And I was just 2.5 years old. I said, it's a spider in the grass. And you know, and so I'm not trying to compare my 2.5-year-old artwork to Clive Barker's, but something I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around is this sort of universal idea of what we, you know, human beings do with taking chaos and organizing it into something, you know, to taking abstract artwork and creating some kind of a visual, you know,
using our imagination.
Yeah, we're using our imagination to make something that is just like, you know, my little drawing there was kind of just a bunch of nonsense. And you know, and even at that super young age, you know, I turned it into something in my head.
You know, I mean, this is what you were doing when you were 2.5 years old, and you didn't have the motor skills yet to draw an actual spider in the grass. So this was what you came up with, and it's you know, what's great is
I think I named it after I drew it, though. I don't think I was planning it to be a
a spider in the grass, actually, but it's art, you know. It's from paintings in the cave that some cavemen did, you know, 3,000 years ago, to stuff that we're discussing now. It's always been at the root of our imagination as a species. The way that we can create different versions of the world, and say, hey, I did this. I created the world in the way that I see it. And this is the hunt. This is me as a deer. This is my hand that I put on the wall of this cave. And I wonder how sometimes, if those Neolithical men realized that their hand would be in that cave wall for the next 5, 7, 8,000 years, and that people in the future would be not just seeing that hand all over the world, but seeing that, hey, they existed, they were there.
Well, also in trying to scrutinize it and trying to find the meaning behind it.
Right, yeah. Figuring out their religion and way of life based on those,
Yeah, and so, it goes to show that we've been attempting to interpret art in all of its forms since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Trying to, discover ourselves and the meaning of, the meaning of our purpose of us.
I like this quote that David Lynch said one time, which is he was talking about art, and he was talking about the meaning of his movies, and how sometimes an idea comes and he writes a script, and then he's going to shoot it as a movie, and then he's shooting it, and then he shoots it a different way, and then he gets an idea to shoot it in a different way that seems like it's going to be it's not going to be right, but then he shoots another scene, and then he shoots another one, and then all of a sudden he understands how to shoot a scene that's going to connect the two scenes that he just shot, and it's going to make both of them have meaning. And he also explained something which I think is really important, which is there is mystery and there is confusion, and these are two very different things. So when you're making art and people look at it and try to decode it, we have these detective brains, right? We want to make sense of things. We want to decode them and understand what's behind them and give them a meaning. And sometimes you think, oh, this is, a house made of sticks. Or sometimes you say, well, this is obviously, a representation of depression. And sometimes you say it's a spider in the grass. and those things are not all wrong. They're just all different meanings to something that is only the artist would be able to give you some sort of explanation of what his mindset was at the time that he made it. But he puts it out there and it becomes its own thing. That's, I think, what gives meaning to art, is that it is something that it's a representation that somehow is magically imbued of meaning by the person that looks at it. And if you have the right key to what the artist was trying to do, then you might be able to give it a more correct meaning to what it is. But at the same time, if you don't know that, you can still give it meaning, and it will still be correct. Because, not to make it a very solipsistic view, but, we do give meaning to the world in our own minds every day. Each one of us, we look at something. What I think is red might not be the images that pop in my mind when I think about red might not be the same images that pop in your minds when you think of red, or you hear the word red, or you listen to or read the word. It's like that quote at the beginning of Scarlet Gospels, where they ask a blind man what's to describe the color red, and he says it's like the blowing of a trumpet, right? Yeah. So it's just everything is symbolic in our brains, and we always try to make sense of things. But I think the important thing here is that Clive is still very much an artist through and through, and he's still very much doing art. And some of this is going to end up in Abarat, and some of these paintings are not going to be just like what we saw in Abarat 1. They're going to be more like emotional, more like impressionistic. Some of them are not going to be as figurative, but they're going to still be conveying his accompanying vision to the story.
He had said there would be fewer scenes and more paintings that convey the people and what the people are like or what they're feeling.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the one truly beautiful thing, is that despite all of the trials and tribulations and all the hardships and all these terrible things that have happened to Clive, that he's still not only making art, but he's making some of the most powerful art that he's made. These pieces are so evocative and so moving and so full of emotion, and it is because of that looseness of the liquidity of the paint and whatnot, and I don't know. There's something that is really powerful about the pieces that he's made post Coma. And when this series first started, I was under the impression that this was only going to be the large scale oil paintings, and the fact that these later volumes include his more recent works made me really, really happy, because I feel like they have just as much merit as his earlier stuff.
And he's still very prolific. There's a part here where he talks about some of these more abstract paintings. He mentions, these I did, I want to say, in 6 weeks, and I think I did 130 of them. So, so we're talking 42 days, he made 130 paintings. So you can see how he's still churning these out. The hand is still, puppeting him through to put all this stuff out. He can't stop.
Yeah, but they don't feel like that there's something that's churned out. They feel they literally are tapping into his subconscious and seeing him almost bleed onto the canvas paper in color. That's kind of what it feels like.
I might have used the wrong word there. Yeah.
No. But
you've corrected me very appropriately. Thank you.
I didn't mean to, but there's reading at the beginning of him being in Hawaii and saying that that he was so depressed that his reservoir was depleted, and then you hear about how depressed he was post Coma. He says, see if I can find it. There's a section in here where he talks about also being in. Okay, here it is. He says that he's surrounded by dogs, dogs hovering around him with a parrot screaming at you. But I got so profoundly depressed, so profoundly angry with myself that I was allowing the problem to dominate my access to something that was very important to me. So I thought, well, let's do this, and if they're not good, even if only 1 in every 10 is good, then that's the only one that they'll see. And that's when he began to experiment and find new methodologies and begin to make these really abstract pieces. And he says the Islamic law about not representing things. In a Persian carpet, you're not allowed to show birds, so you make a symbol of a bird. So the Persian carpet becomes, and this is where Reworld originates, a series of symbols representing living things. So by deconstructing representational things, I get to abstraction. And, that's it. That kind of symbolizes his progression in his art style too, is that when you look at the drawings he was doing in the 70s for The Candle in the Cloud and The Adventures of Maximilian Bacchus and the like, you have these really, really obsessively detailed drawings, these illustrations, and slowly and surely, not only do you get back to the obsessive illustrations that he was doing on these 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, but you also fall into these crazy abstractions of these these abstract pieces of art.
A couple of pages after that, he does he says something that goes right hand in hand with what he was saying before. He says, I make abstractions with expression, particularly in these pictures which express a state of profound chaos and despair. And I think if we say, well, this is really a head, it's just got a lot more chaos around it, we might be leading the viewer up the wrong alley. I think it would be more truthful, and this is just the artist speaking, that really these are much more closer to Rothko's than they are to Yektai or Hockney or Rauschenberg, people who use a chaotic field of paint, but bring from that chaotic field of paint something that's representational. Do you see what I mean? And Yeah, absolutely. He still talks about the importance of color.
Yeah,
he says that some of the abstract paintings, the abstraction is something that doesn't demand the eye to go to one particular place. It asks the eye to engage with the entire field of color, and as a consequence, he thinks these would be wonderful revelations to people as they were to him. They're a whole new life form, if you will. And they do seem that way to me. I am enthralled by these new paintings that he did in 2017, 2018. These paintings that are more these splashes of color, these drips of color, these almost like flowers, if you will. These fields of color that merge with each other. I really am seduced by this stuff, just as much as I am by the amazing islands with a giant skull and the little tiny villages and all that stuff. It's like, it's different, but it's still kind of engaging in a different way.
It's an evolution, and that's one thing that I really hope for the future is, that Clive is still painting every day. Like he said, he did 130 pieces in a couple weeks. and so I would love to see another art book of just his more recent works of the smaller figures that he's been doing and these more abstract pieces, and because they have just as much merit as these large ones. And one thing that Clive notes is that he kind of compares his the toxic shock and then the coma to Goya's deafness. Mm-hmm. He says Goya's deafness initiated a whole renaissance in his art. He went deaf at 43, I think, or thereabouts, and suddenly he was there. And until that time, he'd been a so-so court painter, and there were no monsters. The sleep of reason produces monsters. There was none of that. There was no capriccios, no disasters of war. The portraits of the royals became truthful, horribly truthful, monstrously truthful, and he heard roarings like tinnitus writ large in his head all the time. Yeah. And out of that came some of the most extraordinary paintings ever made. And, that those are the black paintings. And those are, in my opinion, Goya's best. And I think, this is essentially the same resurgence or renaissance in Clive's art here with these new pieces. And to be honest, when we start talking about the paintings that I have bookmarked the most are his more recent ones.
Yeah, and
sure.
It makes you think about how he was concerned that Abarat 4 and 5, maybe people would be disappointed that the paintings will be different than they were in 1 through 3. But really, I think everybody's just excited about it. It's like, what do you want to show us?
Well, the paintings also have always been evolving. The first ones that he did for Abarat were the 24 by 24 smaller canvases. And they had almost a more, I don't want to say like Seussian style, but they were more like silly and as Clive went on, the canvases do also tend to get more dark, and there were times where the canvases also did get more abstract, or he would do these smaller acrylic and pastel pieces for, I believe, having to make pieces quickly for publication of Abarat, just kind of these fill-in pieces, if you will, because when Clive paints those large oil paintings, the impasto on that takes months upon months to dry. So, I think that's why he was making some of the smaller pieces, is not having enough time to paint the large pieces. But one thing one final thing I do want to share from this introduction, which I think is one of the best in the series, is talking about what we were talking about at the beginning, about just the cyclical nature of history and kind of how we're in a moment of time where we're finding that the dark recesses of history's past seem to be kind of repeating themselves. We're in a time right now where there's protests all over the country, and we're having this discourse around Black Lives Matter and whatnot. And Ryan, on Facebook, the quote from the beginning of the volume you said was poignant, and the poignancy just resonates throughout, but it really resonates with this quote here, in which he says, quote, "I have what can only be called genocide in Abarat. in the fact that it's led by the kind of people that persecute people who are blue or green as opposed to black and yellow, or that they go to a different church, or they practice love in a different way, is by the by. It's the same old story throughout history of how differences in others have always been treated, and I've very often been pro others. Nightbreed being an example where people identify with the monsters. Yeah. And so that's just another, thing of Clive being a prophet in ways of being ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Ahead of the curve, and yet still bringing back past history that doesn't seem to change. There's a. Mm-hmm.
But I hope that at least the United States is going to see some pretty sweeping changes coming from this.
I think this is the first time I've ever had hope for that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
today I was listening to the radio and I heard someone in the military, a high-ranking officer, talk about in regards to things like changing the names of bases and stuff.
Yeah, from Confederate soldiers. Yeah,
exactly. So he was saying that we're in a time where where change is possible, even if momentarily. And so it is in these times of turmoil that are open. The people are open to change and open to listen to other points of view. Mm-hmm. That we should seize these moments where change seems possible due to protests or due to whatever. But these are the times where we should open our minds to change and do it, because otherwise, when all this stuff wears away, because we're all people who eventually our energy is limited. We can't keep protesting forever. We want to return to normal eventually. Yeah. And then you can feel that the momentum, we do mention the momentum of the situation, the zeitgeist, and it doesn't hold forever, right? People eventually
something else horrible will come along.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. Yeah. We still haven't finished with this virus yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently now there's a second wave on the run, and there's been states where there's been record numbers of daily infections that we didn't see before in the whole 3 months that passed. So, I mean, and we're still plateaued at 1,000 COVID-19 deaths a day. And I was listening to a health official the other day say something that, we're at 114,000 deaths, and by the end of June it'll be probably 130,000, and then at 1,000 deaths a day, that's another 30,000 deaths per month, and that's
and they said that there are other countries that have finished with it.
New Zealand has 0 cases now.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Although of course being on the other side of the world and being more isolated and all that stuff that does, but and they said that we shouldn't expect the situation to change that much until the end of the summer. So we might be able to reach at the point where America will have 200,000 COVID-19 deaths. But anyway, in regards to the social and the civil rights protesters and stuff, this general, or whatever he was, I think it was general, said that, it's in times like these where it seems like change is possible, that we should seize that moment and do changes that we have to do. And there's no other way of doing it, no better time to do it than now,
Yeah.
And Brian, your quote, the Clive Barker quote that opens this, talks about imagination, and Clive says something here at the end of this introduction, so we can move on to the paintings, that says, art is magic, art is a transformative act. It's taking the base material of reality and turning it into the philosopher's stone. And the philosopher's stone is something we embrace because it's everything we want the world to be. So some people talk about the philosopher's stone being, it's a thing that would turn lead into gold. It would be the thing that would give you riches. Other people say the philosopher's stone was the great work, the great work of turning bad things into good things, bad energy into good energy, of being able to change the world and grabbing a bad situation and make it a good situation, getting something good out of it. And this is the transformative time that we're living in now, where you had the Me Too movement where, people who had a dynamic of power for decades ended up being ostracized, brought to justice, sent to Riker Island.
Yeah. There were sweeping changes,
because people held on to the momentum of the protest, held on to the momentum of the shift in power.
And that, I was just going to say, that's what I feel now.
Yeah, and a lot of what's going on is just due to the proliferation of smartphone cameras. I mean, just the fact that people are being videoed with. And the news has kind of stopped covering the protests and stuff, but they're still happening all over the country every day. And the fact that we had protests not only in every state in this country, but also in like 17 or 18 other countries as well. Like it was a global thing, and it was a beautiful thing. And this is the first time that, I feel like it has the momentum to make sweeping changes we're now talking about changing, the names of bases from Confederate soldiers, and you see people, actually taking to the streets and taking down, the statues, and like it does feel like we're on the precipice of hopefully a new and better world.
And it's an imagined world that can be real. Yeah. So that's where imagination and art and, who changes the world? Artists change the world. It's not bureaucrats that come up with poems that will, inspire societies. It's artists. And I'm not dissing on bureaucrats. I'm sure they have their own way of petitioning and stuff and making changes. But it really, you need imagination. You need to imagine a better world and then work to make that a reality. Otherwise, if you didn't have imagination, then there's no change. Yeah. And without any change, you just stagnate.
And art isn't a filler thing. Good art can help shape your worldview. There was a video going around on Twitter and Facebook this week from the Munsters, so just an episode from the 60s, where Herman Munster is giving the speech to his son, and he's saying it doesn't matter what color you are, or if you're fat or skinny, it matters about the shape of your character. Mm-hmm. And for the time, that was pretty revolutionary words, and I have always felt that the horror community, or that horror has, in my opinion, it's made me a more accepting person and made me more open-minded and more loving and compassionate and empathetic. In Frankenstein, you tend to empathize with the monster, and in Nightbreed, you empathize with the monsters. You're empathizing with the other, and and Clive's work does give you. It shows you a different worldview that you might not have. So we don't have this bigotry. We don't have this fear of people who don't look like us, and it helps to break down those barriers.
I'm very happy that I became a fan of Clive Barker work and not some other artist who would put their own biases into their work, like there are some out there. Anyway, so I guess we can move on to the paintings now a little bit, talk about some of our favorite paintings in this book. And who wants to start?
Jose, I think you should, because chronologically, I think you have the first one on here.
I sure do. So the first one is on page 1279, and it's the very first one in this volume. And it's called A Marriage of Convenience. And I particularly love this one just because of the way that Clive created something that seems very much like a totem of sorts. It is a man sitting on a rock with his arm holding his chin, and then there's another figure sitting on top of the man's head and shoulders, and this figure has no limbs, but it seems to have angel wings, and it's actually looking to the other direction, towards the back of the man who's sitting looking forward. And it's not a very colorful one. It's actually, very much done in subdued blues and greens and teals and blacks. But I just like the composition of it. I love the monolithic statue-like quality of it. And the title is a little whimsical, but
yeah.
I guess they call it a marriage of convenience because one of the characters has no limbs, so he's carried by the other one. But I feel like this is almost like it's both looking backwards and forwards. It's both with his feet on the ground and its wings up in the air. So I like this painting just because it seems to be very encompassing in its themes, and I just like it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have one looking to the east, one looking to the west, and so you do have those opposites, and then one is grounded and one yearns to take flight, I would imagine, seeing as she has wings, yet is strapped to the head of her husband.
It's funny that you're mentioning this one as female. Why do you see her this second figure as female?
She has breasts.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought those were stubs from the arms, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, maybe.
Those are definitely breasts, I think, because they do have wings, so that would be the upper limbs. Okay, a marriage of convenience.
On 1291, Untitled, it's these three sort of monstrous bird heads. And I liked this one, but I also liked the way that it was juxtaposed with the next one.
Oh yes, definitely.
That is page 1292 and 1293. Beautiful. I picked this one too, and then I noticed you already had put it on your list, and I didn't put it on. But I just love the rawness of these figures and the skeletal nature of them, and they look like they are plucked birds almost.
Yeah.
Front of a fire.
Yeah, they almost look like they're dead or like they're roadkill or something.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of frail and skeletal, like Frank the Monster in a way.
It says here that they were also known as the Family.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, they're very loose. They're almost they remind me of something like that Francis Bacon might do, of just the actual color palette and the looseness of the oil paint. Yes. Yeah, and the blocky monochromatic background. But it does give the illusion of them possibly being skinned or something, which this piece was in the Midnight Meat Train, so that's pretty fitting.
Oh, wow! I didn't remember that.
Yeah. So the pieces on 1291 and then the following. There's also there's another creature that is on 1437 that also has this sort of same snout-like, beak-like mouth, and so it just kind of shows that the reoccurring style that Clive sometimes has with his monsters.
And there were stitchlings that also had that sort of shape.
Mm-hmm.
You said 1437?
Yeah, I believe so.
I see it. The Nithaganius Pejorius?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
so,
dragon, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so all three of those paintings for me carry a similar physical.
Yeah, and 1291, the blue ones. Three creatures. They're almost Skeksis-like looking. If you remember the Dark Crystal.
Oh yes, yes. That didn't strike me until you said it. Definitely. And there's like a silhouetted figure sitting atop the top creature there, which I don't know if this is maybe an unfinished piece or what the purpose of the silhouetted man sitting atop is, but
I didn't notice him until you just pointed it out.
But yeah, they're really cool pieces. I really like the Beast's triptych.
Well, Markus, what was your first one?
My first one is actually on the following page of 1295, which is an Untitled piece from. It says pre-2015, but you can definitely tell from the style that this post-Coma. It's a mixed media piece on 9x13 paper.
Yeah,
and you just have this almost monk-like figure who appears to be standing in a forest of sorts with his eyes closed. Perhaps he's meditating, and his clothes are designed with what I'm going to guess is an eyedropper, because you just have this loose spill of purple ink to kind of outline his clothes, and then you have these really abstract kind of blotchy trees in the background, but there's just something so striking about just, I don't know, the emotion that's being emoted.
The shape of the head and the soft features, which are done, I'm assuming, looks like pastels or oil crayons.
It looks like pastel.
Yeah. I've never seen him make such a subtle feature that looks so figurative, and at the same time he's got a great mastery of just a light in this in the features that he made. Usually we see his faces with the big ears and and all the impasto and all the very pronounced contouring with the brushes, but this one, it's almost like it's just the contouring is just created by the contrast between one color and the other. There's not really a line work.
Yeah, it's really subtle. Usually Clive, he outlines everything with these thick black lines. But there's none of that here. It's just these small highlights with what look to be paint to like around the nose or the lips.
And this is another one of those where if you showed this to me and I'd never seen it before, I probably wouldn't know that it was Clive Barker's.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution. But this is all like the reason why I picked more the newer pieces is not only because they, for some reason, are so evocative and really just connect with me on an emotional level, but this is also a piece that if I were to see an Abarat, I wouldn't think twice of, oh, this is stylistically different from the rest, because it's such a complete piece that it wouldn't feel out of place in the narrative.
I thought
that year, though,
the reason that you picked it was because you have this one.
Oh, I would love to have it, but no, I do not.
That year, though, is a dead giveaway that this is Clive Barker.
The ear?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just the way he draws the ear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's for me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And a fantastic feature work here, because it looks like, you mentioned, like a monk figure. So he looks both wise and almost like a baby face kind of thing,
Yeah, which is also pretty. Clive always does these figures that have bald heads and whatnot. So you could I always either lean to monkish or babyish, or it's this weird in between of the two.
Yeah, or no eyebrows that makes them look more like cat people sometimes. But
yeah.
Wonderful choice. I do like these later paintings.
Yeah.
The Three Screaming Heads on page 1343. And again, we're using this. The 8 books have the page numbers just go from volume 1 to volume 8 in a continuous way. I find this one particularly striking to me.
Yeah.
Again, they look like they're mountain carvings, or they're a gigantic hand statue, or they could be some idols of sort, or they can just be some weird creature just coming out of somewhere. It's whatever you want it to be. I was just going to say, again, he doesn't use a lot of color in these, and I don't know why I'm attracted to these more monochromatic paintings. But in this volume, I do have to say a lot of these paintings that I liked are not super saturated in terms of color.
Yeah, these earlier paintings that Clive did, there's not much color in them. But yeah, it for some reason it reminds me of the body politic of it does kind of look like three fingers of a hand to me.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. There seems to be a section of a structure of a hand.
Mm-hmm.
So
that could also be like this gargantuan stone structure to, or mountain thing.
That's what I had seen. I imagined it as like a stone monument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you do have the green. That's like the grass, and then so these are like almost like Stonehenge type
or
idols.
Easter Island Moais.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by gigantic heads made out of stone. From being really very, very young and seeing my early, images and photos of Easter Island to those gigantic stone heads that you find in Southeast Asia and stuff. And it's always, to me, filled me with a sense of awe and mystery to look at those things.
No, yeah, it's really cool. It also, for some reason, just it seems kind of Tolkien to me. Of these giant mountains that could possibly be alive.
And the mines of Moria.
Yes.
My next one, on going back to 1303, Toy Castle.
Yes, I love this piece.
Yeah, and it makes you think about. I mean, just on a practical level, is this really like a small castle, or is it a giant creature?
I would argue that it's a giant creature, mainly because you possibly have birds flying around. There's these little
and trees and stuff. I mean,
yeah, you definitely have the foliage and whatnot.
Yeah,
I always, Clive always does these pieces where he plays with scale, and this is definitely one of those. It also reminds me of the it's the two creatures of of day and night, where they're like almost like gargoyle-esque, and they're both staring opposite each other. It's like the same color palette as that piece as well.
And this is sort of like a gargoyle type creature. It's got just two legs, and it's furry, and it's got big wings and a kind of a frowny face and a long tail that's wrapping around this castle that it's sitting on top of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would imagine from the body language that it would be a menacing creature, but the face is, it's just this sad creature.
Yeah.
I love it. It's got like an old man face.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
These cloudy, nebulous, wide eyes, and it's just kind of pouty. I wonder if it lives here. I wonder if it's protecting the castle. I don't think it's trying to destroy the castle. I think it's just poised very gently on top of the castle. And like you said, the scale of it is defined by the small specks of black that we see around the castle, which are probably birds, and then the trees at the bottom. Toy Castle. That's the name of it. The page next to it, it's hybrid.
Yeah.
And that one, it's one of those paintings where it's not representational, but it's not necessarily abstract. And it's from 1992. And I think this one ended up becoming a poster for a Russell Charrington exhibit of Clive Barker works a few years ago.
Yeah.
So that was
it's a very tribal piece, very almost shamanistic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right on.
And it's got the steak knife lines.
Oh, yes, it does. Yeah.
And it looks like fire in the background.
Yeah. The color palette is really interesting, and the only actual details you get are from the steak knives that make out the teeth and the waves of the dress and whatnot.
I just brought that one up because I remember the hybrid poster, so that's not. Yeah. I didn't really put that one as one of my favorites, but I did want to mention 1375 Self-Portrait.
Oh yes,
which Clive doesn't have a lot, but when he does them, they're really, really cool.
Yeah, this is actually one I wanted to mark as well. I'm glad you did.
This is one of those paintings. it might be Clive Barker's best self-portrait, figuratively speaking, I think. I don't think I've ever seen a painting that he's done of himself that looked so much like Clive Barker himself. It's and it's just surrounded by this wall of fire and power.
Yeah, definitely. And but it's in the Abarat style. Like, it's not like this super representational. It's still, this looks like a character from Abarat in just the actual style. Yet it looks distinctly like Clive. It's a really cool piece. And yeah, you have this Jose, like you said, this wall of fire, and then just this intensely burning imagination that you know is behind his eyes.
You could slap this on the cover of Magic and say it's gentle, and I would totally buy it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
He's got the earrings. He's got the baby blues. He's got the goatee and the spiked up hair, and I just love this painting. It's just such an awesome painting. It might be Clive's best self portrait that he's ever done, and I'm a big fan of self portraits from Albrecht Dürer to Goya painting himself into mirrors and stuff like that. It's just, I always feel fascinated.
Van Gogh and
Van Gogh, definitely. They're just painting. Oh, and this one actually kind of reminds me a little bit of a Van Gogh kind of portrait, self-portrait, just because of the impressionistic way that he painted it.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the background.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like when an artist paints himself as a self-portrait, it's almost like he's reflecting upon himself. He's almost like he's trying to represent himself at one particular point in his life that drove him to make that self-portrait. So I wonder what was in Clive's mind when he painted it in 2007.
Well, Markus, do you have another one?
My next one is on 1352. It is another more recent work. It's another Untitled from 2015 on 34 by 24 paper. It's oil, and it is a very, very loose abstract fish. And
This was on my list too. I mean, I just couldn't take my eyes off of it.
Yeah. There's there's a detail page following, and when you look at it, it is just this mess of color. And when you look at it up close, it is just this very abstract chaos of color. And yet, when you look at the piece as a whole, it's this cute little fish. And yeah, but it's so loose, like you can see seaweed and you can see the air bubbles coming out of the fish's mouth and whatnot. And if you were to first take a look at it, you might just think it is a wholly abstract piece. But then when you kind of give it more attention, you realize that it is this fish, and you do start to see the detail, which Clive in his more recent works has been doing, which is really a really cool style.
It almost looks like a study, but it's just due to the nature of the messiness of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a red fish with these tigerish kind of stripes, and he's got these yellow highlights on the front and these black stripes in the back of his body. And like you said, you called it seaweed, which again is our imagination making sense of what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Just like when we were playing Atari games and we see a little rectangle, we say that's the bullet. That's the gun.
Or that one's a dragon.
And the detail of it, the detail of the colors, and how they're just kind of runny, but at the same time, there's in the detail, there's two pages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on the page on the left, if you look at the splotch of red that's on the top of the page, and then there's a section where you can actually see some highlight of white, like the light is glinting off the paint.
Yeah.
And it almost looks like it's still fresh. Like if you touch it, your hand is going to come out and it's still going to be red. So amazing that the paint has dried and it still shines as if it's fresh. What a mess.
It's a testament to how...
What a mess. What a beautiful mess.
Yeah. And how clearly they can scan these. I mean, into the amount of detail.
The Judge on page 1383 is my next one. I didn't have a lot of them. I just want people to be able to to experience this book on their own. But the judge definitely is a very monolithic, patriarchal, godlike figure with the triangle hat, that the blue robe and the long beard that takes almost like a third of his body, and just sitting in a throne in power. I just think this painting is almost like a young teenage version of me would think God looks like.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if this is an Abarat character that we haven't seen yet, maybe from Abarat 4.
That would be my guess, especially because it's named.
Yeah.
The position that he's sitting on reminds me of the Francis Bacon Pope, what's his name? That painting where it's a Velázquez painting, but then Francis Bacon made a different version of it, and I'm trying to remember. Hang on, let me just. It's a figure from the church, and he's sitting in his kind of chair.
Is it Screaming Pope?
Pope Innocent the 10th. Okay. Yes, the Screaming Pope. It's a man sitting on a kind of a throne of sorts, and Velázquez painted him with his, purple and red, accoutrements, looking straight at the person looking at the painting, like with his big kind of serious face, and then Francis Bacon painted him as Francis Bacon would, looking like a spectral apparition that you can almost see through, and he's surrounded by these almost like these circles of fire, and he's got this like screaming expression on his face, and almost in a sense the composition of it, the positioning and the fact that he's sitting on a chair and the position of his arms kind of looks similar to that. It just reminds me of that one. But of course, done in a much more colorful and Barker aesthetic to it. And he's also staring straight at you from the painting of the judge. So
my favorite aspect is the purple beard.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's it's wonderful.
He's used too much purple shampoo on that thing. Definitely. I just love the chromatic richness of the robe and the way that he put these ochre splotches to balance the blue and all that stuff. So great.
The ochre background. Yeah.
On 1341, Lucifer's Fool.
Yes.
This one really stuck out to me because it's like ridiculous and terrifying at the same time. And it's like, this really does look like some kind of a court jester in hell that, it's like, I don't ever want to see this guy or be anywhere near where he's from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was a piece that was for sale on the real Clive Barker store back in the day.
Oh.
And did
someone buy it?
Oh, yes.
Another one done with the dropper, where you see swatches of. It's almost like it's almost like a spiky kind of color, made with splotches of black paint, and then somehow he uses those splotches to delineate the features as well.
Yeah, I guess I never really saw it as a collar, but now that you mention it, it is like a jester's collar. Like clown collars they used to have, but like a hellish version of it.
Yeah.
Like a barbed wire collar.
Yeah. And then you have it going all the way up these two horns that you have protruding out of his head that almost make a crescent-shaped moon.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has this long goatee that goes all the way down to the end of the piece, and
the orange skin.
And no pupils in his eyes, right? That could give him this sort of a dead look.
Very corpse-like, yes, very dead look.
And the rest of his body is just hinted at. It's just sketched. It's very, very.
It literally just dissolves into the monochrome background.
Yeah.
I think it's a very powerful one. Yeah. Especially the shape of the head and the beauty, like you said, the crescent shape of the moon that makes up not just the shape of the head, but also makes it look like they're horns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Clive's choice of color is always, like always the best, always it really makes it pop. And the choice of color here between the green and the blue and the orange and yellow, and it all just blends so wonderfully.
Long lost cousin of Kinski.
Yeah, this was another piece that I was going to list, and then I saw, Ryan, that you had already listed it. So I was happy about that.
Yeah.
What's your next one?
My next one is, let's see here. On page, what page is this? It would be 1363. Mm-hmm. It's another newer piece from 2016, Untitled, except for it's a triptych on 3 pieces of mixed media paper, and it's completely abstract. It's just this wash of color of just these greens and oranges and yellows, and you have to the upper right-hand side these almost like rivulets of blue, like these rivers that are just running down from atop the page and running down, and in the middle you have almost this lake bed of color. And
I saw a forest in this one when I looked at it.
That's what I was saying. My brain is already trying to make sense of this, and it's showing me like a forest. It's a jungle,
and then like almost a night sky that you're peeking out into in the middle there.
Oh, wow. Okay. I see it now. And that's the wonderful thing is, like, literally you could come at this in any way and start to see these different things. And it really is kind of like a game of your subconscious of like, what can you find? What can you see that isn't really there, but is there?
Yeah. There's areas where all of a sudden it almost looks like there's light shining, like on the right side of the picture in the lower part there's this brown splotch, and then over that there's like a bright yellow and then some green. It almost looks like there's light there. And then on the left side of it, on the top, you see these bluish and purples, and then there's these highlights of red, and almost looks like there's some sort of red light there as well. So,
or it could even be like a satellite photo, like of topography, of just of a landscape above, like, I don't know. And this was the first time I'd seen Clive do one of the abstract pieces in a triptych. And that's what really stood out to me is that he was still starting to go bigger with these pieces, even, in this medium. And of course you can see his fingerprints literally all over it too.
He did say he painted with fingers.
Yeah.
There's a passage on page 1273 that I think might relate somehow to this, where he says there's a lot that represent carpets with abstracted forms on them, that if we just sit back and sort of meditate on the abstraction, they become delicious in their own form, in their own right. They're pure abstractions, that is to say, there's nothing there that represents anything. To me, they're powerful because they do represent things. They are states of mind. I'm going to go for a more whimsical one. And one of the last ones I have here is page 1420, and it's the Zetek. 1420. One of the Zeteks that destroys the shipment of fish in the boat when Candy is on board the fishing ship.
And I think this painting is in Abarat too, right?
It's in Abarat too.
Yeah.
I just love this little guy. Yeah. I wish I could get the copy of this. And,
he's so grumpy.
It's not the original. I just love it when Clive creates these little creatures, and they just look so amazing. And this to me sums up the whimsical and beautiful and childlike nature of Abarat when he makes these creatures that they're just such a delight to look at. You just look at this little monster, and he's not scary. He's kind of cute. He's kind of whimsical. He's got a funny look on his face, but at the same time, he's not a good guy. But I love the Zetek. And,
where he has one eye staring straight at you, and then one eye off to the right, kind of, just looking elsewhere, and
like a chameleon.
Yeah, and the three pieces of the Zethic, Untitled, and Stitchling, they're all oil pastel on paper. These I mentioned earlier that there are pieces in their Abarat series that aren't the large oil on canvas.
Yeah,
these are more like pieces that he probably hadn't done and he needed to put into kind of fill maybe like pages in the books that hadn't had illustrations for it, and he needed to make something really quick. And even these, in the context of Abarat, you never would have guessed that the Zethic wasn't an oil on canvas. You wouldn't have guessed that it's just pastel on paper.
It's a delightful little character. I just love this guy.
Yes, definitely.
And all those little beasts that he created for
Jump Tribe?
Yeah, for Jump Tribe, exactly. Yeah. The ones that we had that canvas full of like little animals on Imagineer 6. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just love these little creatures. They're just, where do they come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this one. It's very whimsical, and I feel like this is also a part of Clive that loves to create these little beasts and monsters, but not necessarily to scare you, or not necessarily to make you think that they're somehow divine, but they're just whimsical little creatures with funny looks on their faces, and they're just a delight to look at.
Yeah.
And speaking of whimsical, back on 1365, Untitled, it's a big chicken.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, it's full of falvous color. And this is a piece where I feel like if you didn't have the black outline to show the chicken, and if you just had the colors, you never would have guessed that it was a chicken. It would just feel like an abstract piece.
Right, yeah.
Because the colors of it literally is just a rainbow of feathers.
Right, and the body colors kind of blend in with the background a little bit, with the way they flow and curve around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the background, is just a lot of just abstract shapes of color. Like the only true representation you have is the horizon of the landscape with those two trees.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if this was painted for Abarat and not used, or maybe painted for Abarat 5 or 6. 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When the great mystical chicken comes down to Chicken Town and releases all the other chickens in the chicken factory,
he's gonna kick open the gates.
Yes. This will be the Deus Ex Machina of Abarat. He's gonna save everybody.
It's going to be the great chicken of Troy. Comexo Kid's going to come out of it.
There you go. Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. It's interesting. There's a legend in Portugal. It's about a rooster, a magic rooster, and it's a rooster that you can find many depictions of it made out of clay, painted in black and many colors. I think the legend of it goes a little bit like there was one guy who was going through a town, and he was just a foreigner, and there was some sort of crime in that village, and of course the foreigner ends up getting arrested, and because nobody knows who he is, and he's like, oh, they must have done it. And so he's taken to the judge who's having his meal at the time. He's having lunch, and he says, so what are you doing here? And what is your alibi? And you're the guy who made the crime, who did the crime. And he's like, no, I'm innocent. I'm so innocent that I promise, to the powers above, I am innocent as that rooster that you're eating is going to gain feathers and crow. And at that moment, the crow, kind of comes back to life and kind of gets feathers and crows from the judge's plate, and the judge let him go. So that's the little fable.
Wow.
Of the Barcellos Rooster. So the town is called Barcellos, Barcelos, and you can look it up in Google. You will find many depictions of the Barcellos Rooster. He is usually painted in black and with lots of colors and shapes inside. So
he wakes up and goes, "Why am I alive? This is horrible."
Yes.
Someone.
Why am I
me.
alive? And why is my wing missing?
Yeah. Kill me.
So it's the big zombie cock of Barcellos Rooster. There you go. And it kind of ends up representing a little bit Portugal in certain, cultural depictions of Portugal. People usually use the Barcellos Rooster to sell that to tourists in Portuguese gift shops.
Okay.
So it's in the north part of the country. There's a lot of interesting legends like that. There's magic and magical princesses and Moorish princesses that would seduce travelers walking through the woods. And it's funny. I mean, every country has its own things. You have the banshees in Ireland and places like that. You have, the leprechauns. And there's shillelaghs and stuff like that. So Portugal has zombie cocks. Anyway, there's a honorable mention I just want to bring up here. Yeah. Page 1407, Tattered Islands on a Branch. This is very meta to me. It's like a Clive Barker painting inside a Clive Barker painting.
Oh, yes.
So he's depicting a painting of an island, almost like a beautiful moment of sorts, hanging from a branch, and he's turned that into a painting of itself. So I love this. I love the way he depicts the moon with a hole in the middle, just like a beautiful moment. And it's just a beautiful meta painting of
you see a Yebidim day and the 25th hour in the middle.
Oh wow.
Oh, I'll be darned. I didn't notice that. You're completely right.
Oh and you see
this is an Abarat painting that we haven't seen in a book yet.
I think this was in 3 or 2. I've seen it before. Yeah,
the pyramids of Zuxux.
Yeah,
on the right side there. I didn't realize that. Now I was just looking at it more closely, and you're absolutely right. This looks like it's a beautiful moment inside the Abarat universe.
Yeah, it's some sort of tapestry that has just been long forgotten and has been succumbed to time and elements.
Yeah, a beautiful revisitation.
1369, Princess Boa as a child. Now, have we seen this one already in a book?
Yeah,
okay. So the thing that strikes me about this one is that in Abarat 3 we find out that Princess Boa is just a terrible person.
Yeah, spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, but at this point it's like it makes you wonder, where did she go wrong? I guess what made her become the sort of manipulative, evil kind of person that she is.
Yeah, that's one thing that I failed to mention but wanted to when we were talking in the beginning in the introduction of that. Clive, especially in Abarat 3, all the characters are kind of in this gray area. There's no true good or evil, really, besides seeing what Matter Motley does and finding out her true cruelties. But you up to this point, spoilers, but up to this point, you think Princess Boa is good, and then you find out that she's actually evil, and then kind of the reverse when Christopher Carrion is resurrected. He almost has a change of heart, and he's not as much the villain that you thought he was.
Yeah,
and so you have all of these shifts in characters and kind of this gray area of where their allegiances lie and their the moralities of the characters and whatnot.
Well, and soon we're going to have a whole episode about Abarat 3, but this is something that sort of has plagued me about this one character. It's like I don't understand. I mean, why did the Sisters of the Phantomaya, decide to take her soul if it was her soul's, was so perfect and pure, and they wanted to take it and put it into candy so that it could survive, or that it could, be reborn, and but then you find out that she's not nice. I don't know.
We'll have a couple of theories.
Yeah.
I have a couple of theories about that. One could be that they knew that. One is that they wanted to create a marriage between the island of midnight and the kingdom of daytime. So they wanted to preserve that possibility. They wanted to preserve that bloodline. The other was that probably they understood that, much like Thor, being taught a lesson in humility, they wanted Princess Boa to inhabit Candy's body so that she could become, more humble and more understanding of the good qualities that she would find in Candy's soul.
Well, and the series isn't finished also, so we
Yeah, that's the thing is, you have to trust in Clive that he has, reasons for that we're just unaware of yet. Yeah, first reading Abarat 3, that was probably the one thing that really stood out and really bugged me. But having seen that revelation on the rereads that I've done of that book, I'm fine with it now.
Yeah. She's a child of privilege, guys. She's the daughter of a king. She's a princess.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Markus, do you have another one?
Yes. So my next one is on 1387. This one is also untitled. It is oil on canvas, one of the big ones, so it's 48 by 60. It says it's pre-2011, and it is of a female character who is standing and pretty much facing the onlooker with one hand on her hip and the other one resting at her side. Her appearance almost looks like Matter Motley in with almost like the dreadlock, almost hair. Yet she has no real features. Her eyes are completely black. She has no irises or anything. It's really, really loose. It's not very detailed. There's she
almost blends into the background like a stained glass.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The background is like this stained glass relief, and slowly she just kind of dissolves into the background. But around her head is almost like this saintly crown that's around her head.
But it's
I was looking at
it makes
the flatness
of blood and chaos and death.
Yeah, that's the thing is there's no. Her features are completely just done in black highlights, so there's no real telling whether she's of good or ill.
Yeah.
But
and I might be just reading into it because I think it's Modern Motley.
It looks similar, definitely to Matter Motley's physique, but I just really love it because it's really loose and I just love seeing the knife scratches that Clive does, and that definitely accentuates this figure and the stained glass-esque background. And
right, yeah, it's accentuated. That feeling is accentuated by the flatness of the features, like you said.
Yeah, it gives it this really kinetic energy that I've never seen in any other painter do. That Clive is able to do with a steak knife.
You guys know how they make stained glass windows? They melt lead, and then they put all those little pieces of colored glass. There's lead metal connecting all those little pieces, so that the black part that you see in stained glass windows, sometimes it's just a very thin lead armature that is holding all those pieces together. Yeah. It's a lot of work for that.
Oh, yeah.
Reminds me of the stained glass window in the Rawhead Rex movie.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, with the laser beam that kind of goes through the stained glass.
Yeah. While they're singing that hymn.
Mm-hmm.
And the piece of glass that clearly belongs in the part that's missing, but nobody ever figured that out.
Yeah.
I've got another one here on 1405 Vampire Clown.
Yes.
Oh, that's a good.
This is another one that I was going to pick, but yeah, I love this piece.
It's such
a and it's just almost hyper real in the sense that all the contouring is just done with almost like this dripping technique. Amazing! It just feels like the whole image is vibrating.
Yeah, it's almost Van Gogh-ish in the layering of the paint droplets. Instead of like having like, oil brushstrokes, this piece is entirely composed of these droplets of paint. I actually, when I went and visited Tom at Century Guild, he showed me this piece and I actually held it, and it's really, really tiny. It's a really small piece. It's almost like a big bookmark. Yeah, I mean, the amount of detail, it's so meticulously made, so there's so obsessively made that, it's...
Do you think this is a 1-to-1 scale representation of the painting?
Well, it's a 6-inch by 17.5 inch.
Oh, okay. So it would be a little taller than this then.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit longer, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, it's not very big, but the amount of detail that Clive is able to cram in such a small, space is remarkable.
Wow. Yeah.
And so this is 2013, so this is right after the Coma, which would make sense of why he's working on something so small.
There's a lot of work that goes into this. You can tell that there was a lot of time put into this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the piece that if you didn't read the dimensions, you would think it was one of his, probably 24 by 48, inch canvases or something.
Mm-hmm. What an excellent use of color, because you got this almost gold kind of tan color with the red, and then the cyan. Well, I wouldn't call it cyan, more like cobalt blue, but I think those three colors go so well in defining the overall, color of the piece. It's just, they go really well together.
Mm-hmm.
Vampire Clown, 1405.
Yeah. It's a great piece.
What's your next one, Marcus?
My next one is on 1401. It's called On the Hill, oil on canvas 36 by 36. And it depicts a man who appears to be standing in a forest of sorts, holding a torch. And he is illuminating the forest. And from the forest, from the fire's illumination, is this screaming face that is just glaring at him. And, when you read Gothic literature, you read about the uncanny and finding the uncanny, and it's almost like a Nathaniel Hawthorne tale or something, where you have, this character who stumbles into the woods of New England at night and stumbles upon, what can only be called the uncanny, but it's this,
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about it. It also screams of maybe of a hidden darkness or anxiety that you're bringing to light, or it can be representative of so many things, because it literally is the illumination of this dark forest that is engulfing him, which can also lead into Dante, who became lost in a forest and things like that, or lost in a dark wood and things like that. And I don't know, there's so many ways you can interpret it, and so much symbolism that is buried within this piece that I really love.
He had another piece in the previous volume that was similar in theme. There's this gigantic face that's just screaming at a smaller man who's just remember that?
Who's cowering. Yeah, that was one of the pieces I chose. Yeah,
which again, the fascism or something like that, I think.
Yeah, tyranny. Tyranny something. Yeah,
that's it.
But in this case, it's like you said, it's the uncanny, right? You bring light to illuminate the darkness of something, and you find out more than you're expecting. You find out, what's really lurking in the shadows. And
or maybe it isn't the forest. Maybe it is a large mound of dirt or something that has come alive, or like this buried figure. Maybe he's actually going to crawl through the open mouth, a la Candyman, where Helen. Yeah. So I don't know. There's so much in it that I really love.
Well, my last one, 1417. This was my favorite painting in this whole book.
Okay, let's go check that out.
The Lightning
1417.
Rider.
Oh, yes.
Oh, wow. Very powerful one. Definitely. Wow.
Yes, very Arthurian.
Yeah, and he's got
To
he's got like a spear that's a lightning bolt, and he's attacking this other creature or person.
Yeah, it reminds me of I didn't think of it till just now, but it's the Archangel Michael smiting down Satan. There's a name for it. I don't remember the exact name, but
yeah,
that's what it reminds me of.
I was reminded of a painting of the same thing you're talking about, where he's just an angel holding a staff with a cross, and then he's just standing on the devil's chest, representing the defeat of Satan and just the submission of it to the divine power. And in this case, he kind of took away a little bit that Christian iconography and just turned it into something. Again, don't want to use this word too much, but almost
shamanistic. Yeah,
shamanistic.
Definitely.
It could be in a cave somewhere. This could be something in a cave in Central America with all these colors and
Yeah, and yet the background once again almost looks like very like Catholic, or almost like the stained glass of a church. You do, in fact, on the bottom left, you do have a mosaic. Like a mosaic, and on the bottom left, you do have a serpent that is slithering up the leg of the horse, which does make me think if this is Clive's version of the Archangel Michael destroying Satan.
I mean, definitely could be. I mean, Clive has a Catholic upbringing, right? So it's safe to assume that this is something that he has been exposed to and definitely is part of his imagined subconscious.
Yeah.
Wonderful choice there, Ryan.
Yeah.
So you said this is one of your favorite one from this book?
I think yes. Yeah.
Artist Rennie from 1635. But yeah, there's a plethora of different interpretations of that same image of this archangel holding a sword while stepping on the head of Satan, and Satan's tail is a serpent that's wrapping around Michael's leg. But again,
I actually found a whole album of representations of that. I'm going to add that to the show notes.
Oh, right. Cool. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and Marcus, we're going to want to add your the painting that Jose talked about of yours on the show notes too, if you have a link to it or.
Oh, okay, yeah, definitely.
Part of the anxiety series that you made in 2018.
I'll make a little gallery down at the bottom of the blog post.
You got it. I just love the way that you depicted the body and the nails, and especially the face. It's just really, really awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah. So this painting ends. This book ends with an epilogue of sorts, or I would say, what do you call this?
Afterward.
Outro. Yeah. Afterward. Thank you. By James Kay from Transmission Atelier. So he's the guy who worked with a lot of the images and photography that was done for the paintings that illustrate all these 8 volumes. And he talks a little bit about his experience being in Clive Barker's studio and looking at all these paintings. He had to, after the paintings were photographed, he would pull the digital file on his computer, and he would actually have a light box illuminating the painting, and he would color match them to the calibrated screen that was in front of him, so they would be as realistic as possible to the real color that he could see. So there was a lot of work done in terms of making those images very print quality. And he says that the nights that he spent in Clive Barker's studio, he experienced his own mystical journey and alchemical transformation. He hopes that when we look at this book, we will also experience the magic and the alchemy and the story within the story that he kind of started seeing by himself when he was looking at all these paintings with Abarat.
Yeah, I thought that was a great afterword. And it's kind of nice to get another reminder of what, the people that spend some time, in the studio house there, the feeling that they get,
Yeah, and James Kay did so much work. It took months to scan and photograph all these paintings. So it's nice to see him more recognized than just a thank you at the beginning of the book.
I mean, every single one of these books has had names at the beginning of people who supported very, very substantially the making of these books. And one of them is one of our sponsors, Don Bertram, Celebrate Imagination. And for this volume, it says Michael Kuka, Cesar and Marta Chavez, Humberto Pereira Figuera, and Jake Honzik. So I'm guessing these were very, very big backers of these books. And without them, these books would take a longer time to get put out. So it's amazing that all these great Clive Barker fans decided to support this project, and we're supporting it in our own way. We just we love to talk about it and promote it. And go to the Clive Barker Archive, clivebarkerarchive.com. You can still buy from volume 2 onwards. These are very rare books. These editions that we're talking about are just limited to 1,000 copies.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be around forever. And I think the second volume is still available. First volume is already long gone. Yeah. You're only going to be able to find it at very inflated prices on eBay if you can find it. So go there and check it out, because there's so many other paintings in this book that we didn't discuss. This book has almost 100 paintings, and I think we might have discussed maybe a dozen or 20 of those.
Yeah.
So
this whole series has been fun. It'll be a little sad when we finish up Imaginer 8.
Yeah, I agree. It's always a pleasure getting to talk art and philosophy with you guys, and get different interpretations of Clive's art that I wouldn't have thought about.
I guess not to put more work on our plate, but we could go through like Pandemonium and Illustrator 1 and 2 in this same way.
Yeah, that's true.
And Visions of Heaven and Hell.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to get some of those books because I don't own them yet, or I don't have them with me at the time. But that sounds like an interesting thing to do. Yeah. Why not? Let's put that for maybe 2021.
Yeah. No big hurry for that. It's just an idea.
Yeah.
If it's another excuse for all three of us to get together and whoever else wants to join us, that sounds amazing to me.
Yeah, I second that definitely.
So that's coming fun. Next, we're going to have an interview actually that we should be recording here in just a couple of days. We will be doing another audio commentary for the movie Halloween in E is for Escape in our Clive Barker's A to Z of Horror series. More news, like we just said, we'll conclude the Imaginer series with Imaginer 8, and coming pretty soon we're going to be talking about Abarat 3 Absolute Midnight. And I'm looking forward to that one. That's a book that I've only read once, and I'm just getting into it again now.
Listening to the Audible book, and if you can find the hardcover with all the paintings, that's the version to buy.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.
You can find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com. We've got an archive of past episodes, news, features, and reviews, along with all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on every other place you can find podcasts. Share your thoughts with us, and share our podcast with your friends. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that's not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.